Good afternoon. Welcome to the Village Council special meeting of October 30th, 2025. We are doing this in lieu of the North Carolina Department of Transportation meeting at the Fair Barn Tuesday. So we made accommodations so that council members could attend that with fellow residents, and now we're going to try to get back on schedule starting at 5 rather than 4:30, and we all adjusted our clocks. So we'll call this meeting to order, and we'll begin as we usually do. I'll ask Reverend Tudor Foley to come forward and provide the invocation.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we ask you to bless this mayor and council as they represent the people and our community of Pinehurst. Grant that they may have a spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice, that with steadfast purpose they may serve as they consider the needs and concerns of our community. We thank you for their time and service, and we pray that they may have all the blessings that you may bestow upon them. We pray also that this meeting will be guided by honesty and respect for all. In your holy name, amen.
Thank you. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, in God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All righty. As is our tradition, we'll begin with reports, and we'll start with our village manager, Doug Willerton. Doug?
Yeah, I only have one thing I wanted to bring up. The police department is holding a Stay Out of the Rough Fraud Prevention Town Hall. So this will have some of our detectives on the force teach people how to recognize and prevent and report common scams. So that will be held here in this room on Friday, November 14th from 3 to 5 p.m. And with that, I will turn the time back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. That's an interesting event they're going to be holding. I have two things. One is I had the opportunity a week or so ago. I attended the Sandstone short-term, long-term 100-bed skilled nursing center that's in the midst of its development. It was called a halfway home event. John Taylor was there also, and they were showing us the progress they've made on this facility right there by Ironwood Cafe. You may have seen it when you drive past it, and it looks like it's going to be a state-of-the-art facility and it'll be a great addition to the village of Pinehurst. That went well. And then along the lines of the police, you know, every now and then I pay real attention to the daily reports they put out, and there was one that caught my eye the other day because it had literally 119 calls for service, which is pretty large for the force. It's usually a little under 100. But to give you an idea, this was on October 21st. They issued 5 citations, 7 written warnings, 2 verbal warnings. They helped with one mental patient issue. There were 2 crashes. There was 1 false alarm. There were 5 animal complaints, which is one of the things that caught my eye. I don't usually see a lot of those. And 1 noise complaint. But they addressed 911 hang-up calls, illegally parked vehicles, and so forth. So our police department, in addition to holding these useful events, is out there serving the residents of Pinehurst throughout the village, and we thank them for their work. Now I'll turn to Dr. Morgan.
Thank you. A couple things. CPRC had its last meeting of the year. That was on 22 October, so this past Wednesday. They, of course, reiterated the willingness to help any of the municipalities with different tasks that they don't have the staff for. we are pretty robust in our staff, but they continue to offer that. Other topics that they talked about were homelessness, which does not pertain to us a great deal, but certainly it's an issue with the Central Council. I appreciate the information that Mr. Willardson put out about the lectures, the training in there from the police department on scams. Just this past week, I talked to an individual who's one of our residents, and he fortunately caught it, and it was through the assistance of the bank, but he was being scammed for $30,000. And again, an elderly gentleman, and people calling him up and basically saying, hey, you had money that's been taken out of your credit card and put over to this bank account. We need to pull out of the bank account so we can track down the credit card fraud, and he bought into that. So they're very, very slippery and sound very real. So I encourage people to join in that training and have our police department help out. It is a real issue for us. It's a huge issue for us. Other things on there, on 21 October, there was a very interesting lecture on AI. And everybody talks about AI. It was a retired lieutenant general from the Air Force who talked about that and the use of that and the military on there. But it's the Ruth Pauley lecture series. If you haven't heard about that, it's an excellent lecture series of a variety of different folks coming in. November, the lecture will be from someone from Museum of Art. So it's a very eclectic type of lecture series, but they bring in some top-notch speakers, so I do encourage people to join that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. John Taylor.
I think, Jeff, the location for that is Sandhills for the lecture series?
That is correct, yeah. It's in the Bradford Performing Arts Center. Thank you.
As the mayor said, I also attended the halfway home event for the Sandstone Rehab Facility, and there was an initial presentation by one of the chief medical officers at the hospital responsible for presumably helping them and understanding what would be useful and so forth. And one of the first rooms that they took us by, they said, this is the golf simulator room. And so I buttonholed the doctor and I said, I want to know what kind of surgery you have to have where the rehab is using a golf simulator. And he was initially stumped. He actually came up with one thought, but he had to struggle hard. So this is going to be quite a facility. I think it can be difficult for us to get a real sense of scale by either looking at a PowerPoint presentation or an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, but to go actually walk around this place was very impressive. And you might have a tendency to think that this is geared toward higher income type patients. It's really not. Their operating model accommodates all types of insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, and so forth. And I think it's going to be a terrific addition to the area, given the amount of orthopedic surgery and so forth that is done here at First Health. I would comment also my perception of the DOT event on Tuesday night. They certainly weren't going to be outnumbered. They had a tremendous number of people there, I think, learning from the last experience, so that it was actually reasonably easy to get to someone, get questions answered, and so forth. I would mention to people both here in the audience and people looking at this on the live stream or review it, there's a public comment period that is open until November the 12th. You can find, I think, Doug, we have a link to the DOT website on the Village of Pinehurst website, or if you look for, North Carolina Department of Transportation, Pinehurst Traffic Circle, you will get to that website. And as we saw a year ago, the DOT really does respond to public comment. It was one of the driving forces between them moving away from the design they had a year ago to the design they have today. And I would encourage people, whether you were there or not, to send in your comments and your thoughts. The last thing that I would mention is there are 2 more days remaining for early voting up in Carthage for the elections on next Tuesday, 8 to 5 tomorrow and 8 to 3 on Saturday. There's no early voting on Monday, but then you have elections locally here in your normal polling places in Pinehurst. I encourage everyone to get out and vote. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Barbara Ficklin.
Speaking of interesting projects, I attended the Moore 100 members meeting, which was at the Carolina on the 15th of October. A representative from Amazon, as well as someone from Richmond County, were both there talking about the new data facility, data storage facility and AI facility now under construction in Richmond County. There will be around 1,000 construction jobs required for that project. The time span is somewhere between 5 and 10 years. About 500 people are anticipated to be employed by Amazon. So it is a big project, and it will have impact on a lot of surrounding municipalities and territory. And they're on 700 acres, so huge. Also attended Holly Arts. Pinehurst Business Partners supported that. They were there at 4 o'clock in the morning, that Saturday morning, to help people set up all of the vendors. There were 200 vendors there. It was a great event. Thanks a lot to the village of Pinehurst and also to the weather. It was absolutely spectacular and very well attended. The Pinehurst Business Group also met on Monday evening, this past Monday evening, with the CARE Group, which is now located out in West End, discussing, among other things, their successful event as well as their next event, which is the tree lighting on December 5. And they will be providing and helping set up street vendors at that time as well. That's always a great event, so please plan to come put it on your calendars now. In addition to that, the Beautification Committee, last but not least, this morning the Beautification Committee put out 104 wreaths. They were tested and the bows were replaced where needed. 104 wreaths is a lot of bows, so it's really a lot of work. The volunteers will work with the village staff on November 18th when the wreaths are installed in the village core, and it's 104 wreaths on 52 posts, so big event. That's it for me, thank you.
Okay, Jack?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Few things. In your absence, I chaired the NAC Neighborhood Advisory Committee meeting a couple weeks ago, and there was a presentation from the Parks and Recs director on the extensive programs that the Parks and Recs department has. Very well received. The village manager gave some reports on the SAFER program, the application, the grant program for funding, partial funding of public safety people, as well as the status of the library. And I guess we all hope to be manning shovels one of these days, so we'll see how that goes. Thank you. We also talked about a couple other things that we wanted to make sure that people knew about. One is that on Saturday, November 15th, there is the Moore County Solid Waste Annual Residential Household Hazardous Waste Event, and that's held over in in the high school and high school parking lot. It's really very well organized, the Pinecrest High School. So I recommend that if you have any items that you've been wondering how to get rid of and old paint cans and so forth, this is really a great idea to bring them over. They do a fabulous job on, you just open up the trunk of your car and they reach in and grab it. As long as it's labeled properly, they know where to put it. So this is a good event. November 15th, Saturday, from 10 to 2 at the Pinecrest High School parking lot. A couple other things relative to that. Moore County, also, we talked about the Veterans Day ceremony. Veterans Day, of course, is November 11th officially, but there is a Veterans Day ceremony planned from Moore County at the Moore County Veterans Memorial on November 8th. That's the Saturday before at 12 noon. So if you're interested in participating in that, that would be a good event to go to. Also went to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, where we reviewed some current projects, and particularly number 6 sidewalk that seems to be, by all accounts, a raging success within the community. Also talked about reviewing priority intersections within the village. In other words, looking at those intersections, particularly from a pedestrian point of view, that may need attention in the future, that are either dangerous or or may need some attention. So that was the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee. Well, while I have the microphone, I wanted to mention about the Moore County Land Use Plan, which has been approved by the commissioners, as reported in the pilot. And if you look at the Moore County Land Use Plan that was approved, they of course have their goals and a lot of action plans and so forth, but there's a huge amount of information on the municipalities and the areas within Moore County, lots of information on their history, what they do, where they came from, what the population and so forth. I found particularly interesting the tax data, which is towards the end, but I'll just read a couple comments there. The largest, Moore County generated, the unincorporated part of Moore County generated about $18.5 million of revenue, and the village of Pinehurst contributed $18.3 million of revenue towards Moore County. So although the municipalities represent only 9% of the county's total land area, they produce 67% of the total property tax revenue. I thought that was an interesting statistics. In other words, the village of Pinehurst contributes approximately 33% of the total revenue that Moore County receives, just for your information. The other information that's buried, not buried, but in the land use plan talks about the water and sewer systems. And there's some interesting maps that show locations within Moore County, parcels that are within 300 feet of either a public water supply or 300 feet of a public sewer. And as you may know, of course, parcels that are within 300 feet of public water and public sewer are more than likely candidates for development. So it shows an interesting map that shows you kind of where likely development may occur within Moore County. And so there's a lot of information buried within the land use plan, more than just the aspirational things about what land development activities should occur. And it's worth reading if you're interested in Moore County and some information. Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention, Jack. One last minute reminder regarding Veterans Day. There'll be a celebration on Veterans Day itself at the Community Presbyterian Church on Everett Road here at 11 o'clock. So for those who are available, you're welcome to attend. Okay. That concludes the reports from the manager and the council. Let us go on to our next item, item 4, which is the motion to approve the consent agenda. All the items being considered are routine or have been discussed at length in previous meetings and will be enacted by one motion. No separate discussion will be held unless requested by a member of the village council. Is there a motion?
I move to approve all the items listed and consider routine on the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion adopted. Now we'll go on to item number 6, which is the,
Go to 5.
oh, I'm sorry. I got my notes written here. Whoops. 5. You're correct. That has to do with the proclamation of Hospice Week. Hospice Week Proclamation 2025. Before I read this, I want to recognize Maggie and Tina, who have worked on this with First Health and others. So let me read the proclamation. Whereas hospice provides high-quality, compassionate care for patients and families facing life-limiting illnesses, empowering them to live as fully as possible, and whereas hospice focuses on comprehensive pain and symptom management, emotional and spiritual support, and caregiving training, attending to the physical, emotional, and spiritual needs of each patient and family, and whereas hospice professionals, including physicians, nurses, nurse assistants, social workers, spiritual counselors, bereavement counselors, and volunteers, make the wishes of each patient a priority, treating every stage of human life with dignity and respect. And whereas these services are provided in the comfort of a patient's home or care facility, allowing them to be surrounded by loved ones and maintain their independence. And whereas hospice encourages advanced care planning and discussions about healthcare wishes. And whereas recognizing hospice care helps raise community awareness of these services and where to find end-of-life support. Now, therefore, I, Mayor of the Village of Pinehurst, do hereby proclaim November 9th through 15th, 2025 as Hospice Week in the Village of Pinehurst and encourage all citizens to learn more about hospice care. Thank you. Thank you for your work and congratulations on this week. We appreciate that. Okay. All right, now we're back on schedule to public comments. Do we have any public comments? Okay. We do have public comments. Public comment, well, we have from Bill Colmer on Veterans Day. Bill, come forward and remind people of what I said.
Well, Mr. Mayor, you did an excellent job of reminding everybody that the Pinehurst official or the annual celebration of Veterans Day observance will be on November the 11th at 11 o'clock at the Community Presbyterian Church, which happens to be on 125 Everett. And there will be music provided by the Airborne Corps brass quartet, as well as the Golf Capital Chorus. And if you arrive early, you'll be greeted by a bagpiper to help you find your way in. So, but the number one thing we want to do is make sure that everyone is welcome, that everyone knows that they are invited, and we hope to see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have Bruce Geddes, who wants to discuss the circle. Come forward. Please identify yourselves.
Bruce Geddes, Pinehurst ETJ, and I'm here with Jason Kaufman.
Your address.
Number 9.
So we sent you all an email yesterday. Joanne Valdez would like to be here, but she's running in traffic, it turns out. We sent you an email with our comments about the circle. I have a written copy, if I can give it to the clerk. I encourage you to read it. Click on some of the links. You'll see some of the data that we found. 4 points we want to make. The proposed design isn't really proven. It's an unusual design. We did find one outside of Boston in Everett, Massachusetts, and it's got a safety problem. It's one of the top traffic incident locations in the citywide in the city of Everett, Massachusetts, and we've got some crash data. We also see that the proposed design imposes wait times at all hours, whereas today we know the peak times people have to wait at the circle. We've all had to wait, but when we're in non-peak times, we don't have to wait, so that could be an issue. And then finally, there are some other incremental improvements that could be implemented much sooner at much less cost. And we encourage the council to take that up with DOT, as we will. We're going to comment, through the comment portals, and hopefully we can make some earlier progress and maybe make some great strides without necessarily swinging for the fences, which, in 5 years. So thank you for your time. I'm going to give this to the clerk.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And good example for everyone to comment as they'd like to on this. And we, of course, in the council will be taking up this subject a little later ourselves. Is there anyone who didn't sign up to make a comment and would like to make a comment now? No. Seeing none, that closes the public comments portion of our program. And now we enter item 7, which is a public hearing. Doug, do you want to set the stage for this?
I will actually let Alex and Cindy do that.
Okay. Well done.
Should we enter the
Yeah,
public?
Let's,
we can do
I
that.
move to recess the regular meeting, enter into the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we have now entered a public hearing for the purpose of the new Pinehurst Development Ordinance. Alex and Cindy, please introduce yourselves for the record and go right ahead.
Certainly. Alex Cameron, Planning and Inspections Director here with the village.
Cindy Schwartzkopf with Kimley Horn.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and not Doug, for that wonderful introduction to the public hearing item. You guys are aware that we've been working on this project for pretty much since the beginning of the year in earnest. And we are at one of the final checkpoints, which is the council public hearing. Just about a month or so ago, we gave a pretty comprehensive update on the project, and the purpose of the presentation that Cindy and I will go through today, a little bit more brief than the one back in September, is kind of catch everyone up on the events that have happened since that council work session on September 23rd. So Cindy and I both will tag team the presentation. So some of this is going to be repetitive, but it's necessary for the public hearing, we believe. So why is the update needed? So we have a development ordinance that is largely intact from 2014. So it's woefully out of date. We also have since that time updated and adopted several plans, the 2019 Comprehensive Plan, as well as the Village Place and Pinehurst South Small Area Plan, and the Form-Based Guidance Plans. As that document has been, it has some age, it has been amended several times over those years, and in doing so, that does create a lot of inconsistency. So the goal was to remove a lot of these inconsistencies. We needed to update and modernize a lot of the standards, come into compliance with some recent changes with state legislation. The last time this was really done was after North Carolina General Statute Chapter 160D was implemented, and the village's subsequent amendments took place late 2020, early 2021. And update the graphics package is really woefully outdated as well. So we do believe that the October 20th draft, which we have posted since the middle of this month, really reflects a lot of those goals that we sought out with this project. I'll let Cindy talk a little bit about the schedule and key task. As you can see here, with all the check marks, there's been a lot that's gone into this project up to date.
Could you just slide back to the goals for a minute? Just want to be sure we know what we're, okay. Those all flow from our comprehensive plan, in essence?
Some do, of course, but a lot of those are items that we've identified through the years that we recognize that the PDO needs a lot of, again, it's been 11 years since it's been comprehensively updated. It's been amended. I call it Frankenstein. That's not pun intended for the season, but it's been patched together so much through the years. It's working, but it could be a lot better. It also helps staff do their job better and the village as a whole more effectively carry out their codes and ordinances.
Okay, thanks.
Just one quick follow-up on that, though. There's reference both what you just said and also in the first few pages of the draft of the PDO. And I want to be sure as I continue to read through the PDO that I'm doing it with the right focus. The comprehensive plan is a long-range visionary plan. The PDO is a regulatory
That's
plan.
right. That's sort of the law, if you will. The comp plan is what you aspire to be, and it's a very broad document, or it could be as specific as the county's land use plan spoke about earlier. That's a little more specific about how the local jurisdiction wants to manage what those future land uses in their jurisdiction are. Our comprehensive plan is just that. It's very comprehensive. It talks about capital improvements. It talks about, you can have transportation aspects, you can have recreation aspects. One aspect is how you want to regulate the future land use patterns and designs of the area. The PDO is actually what governs and what rules.
Okay. We'll come back to something later, but I want to let you get on with.
Thank you.
All right, well, just going over our schedule, as Alex mentioned, we really kicked off in January of this year, and this lays out our schedule, everything from our community tour. We held 8 focus group meetings over the course of this project. My team spent a lot of time with the village staff and the focus group going over every chapter, the existing ordinance, and just kind of remapping how it should lay out. We had our community meeting in September. We posted a first draft to the website in September. We did a council update meeting in September. We had our final focus group meeting on October 13th, and we presented we presented everything to the Planning and Zoning Board as well, and then we posted a second full draft to the website, and here we are tonight for our Village Council public hearing. So let's keep going. I want to spend a few minutes just really thanking the focus group because it really was a marathon these last 10, almost 11 months, and it took a lot of time and commitment from the individuals that are on our focus group, but I just wanted to call them out by name and thank them for the time that they gave to this effort. Calvin Berkeley, Jack Farrell, Barb Ficklin, Kevin Fitzpatrick, Travis Green, Matt Jones, and Bob Kuntz. It's not an easy undertaking to be a focus group member when you're working on a development ordinance update. It's a very technical document, and we gave them lots and lots of homework over these 10 months, and I greatly appreciate all of the time that they spent with us. But, in addition to reviewing things, they also served as project ambassadors for this effort, and I really do believe that their interest and their commitment to this helped us have a really successful community meeting regarding this effort. So again, I just want to thank them because it was a big effort. And this leads well into our community meeting. We had our community meeting in this room on the 17th, and we had 101 attendees, which is phenomenal for a development ordinance meeting. I can tell you that was the best attended one I've ever done in my career, and it was just fabulous. Our team was really excited. I know village staff was really excited just with the number of people that were here and the engagement that we saw that evening. So just a couple photos from that night. And then kind of just quickly going through the summary of changes. I think Alex and I can probably tag team this slide a little bit. But based on kind of our charge that our team took on to do this project, we spent time making sure that the ordinance is consistent with the general statutes and 160D. We were asked to work to simplify and revise sections. It was a difficult ordinance to utilize as is, so we spent a lot of time really trying to break it down, figure out how to make it flow, add new graphics, add new charts, revise some of the tables so that it's easier for staff to use, it's easier for the community to understand, and then easier for the planning board and the council to use when you are making decisions. We created 2 new chapters related to the form-based districts, updated watershed protection overlay. We recommended a new highway corridor overlay district, revised some of the standards related to tree species, updated some parking requirements to kind of modernize them in line with what we're seeing with general planning practice, and again, worked on a lot of graphics and tables, and just overall improved the formatting of the document. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add related to that, Alex? Oh,
Just
sorry.
one quick question.
Sure.
Every one of these we revised, updated, created. The one that says recommended was the Highway Corridor Overlay District. Can you go a little detail on what was recommended?
Yeah, well, we have I think a slide.
Slide coming up.
Specifically to it, but the reason for the recommended terminology there is really because it's nothing that we can truly implement with adopting a new PDO, if you will. This is, again, based on some of the changes in the state legislature, especially related to Senate Bill 382 with the term downzoning. But having that as an option now in the PDO, and this was something we discussed with Planning and Zoning Board and through a couple of focus group meetings, honestly, and we thought that having that in there could be a bit of an incentive if someone wanted to come through and in an area that might be identified as a highway corridor where, you know, we could try to negotiate having some additional standards to try to protect those highway corridors.
Okay, thanks.
I know at the county commissioner level, there was a lot of discussion with respect to the county land use plan around that. Both what could they do based on regulations from Raleigh, which I think was unfortunately not as much as they might have liked to, and some concerns that various commissioners had. Was there much pushback? I mean, I understand the idea of optionality and having it in there because things can change. What was the level of discussion about that?
It was more that, I mean, this has been a goal and a vision for the village really since the comp plan was adopted. So I think, as a matter of fact, it's one of our implementation strategies, I'm pretty sure, was to revisit and try to implement some more highway corridor standards. So no, it's been very well received and welcomed through the focus group. Of course, there was a lot of discussion and a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Board, which we will speak to in a later slide too, was to make sure we have that in this PDO update. Again, since we can't really apply those standards or map them to a proper, there's no pushback on that side. It's going to be purely a voluntary implementation that we can get, but it's something we have in case the legislation changes. But back to sort of the slide, one of the goals that I kind of skipped over and I think is very important was to make the PDO a much more, to the extent you can with the development ordinance, a user-friendly document, something that's a little more instinctive. I need to know what the parking requirements are. Well, there's a standalone chapter for parking, right? And that's helpful for anyone who has the desire to really crack open one of these documents and read them.
The introduction of graphics, when you start talking about setbacks, much easier. A picture is worth 1,000 words, so I think that was a substantial improvement.
Thank you. So this slide here is kind of on that vein, kind of talks a little bit about the more instinctive look for the new document. We have the old chapter structure there on the left, and Cindy and her group have prepared this sort of translation through the new document, if you will. The bulk of our design standards were all in Chapter 9, so if you're trying to reference a standard, it's like 9.17 point blah, blah, blah. Now, again, those were subdivision standards, so you know those are Chapter 14. And again, it just kind of splits it out a little bit so it reduces the 4 or 5 finger rule where you're holding, you know, your space in one spot, knowing you have to go to another and reference another spot within the document. So we tried to reduce some of those cross references to the extent we could. But this is what new users of the document are going to have to become familiar with the structure.
Yeah, I always call that like the breadcrumb approach. You know, there were so many things that were in Chapter 8 and Chapter 9, and you just had to keep flipping back and forth. So we spent a lot of time with staff really trying to be thoughtful on how do we want to translate the existing chapters into new chapters so that it's much easier. If you're only interested in parking, okay, you know you're going to go to Chapter 11. If you're only interested in lighting, you're going to go to Chapter 12. Sign standards, Chapter 13. So it's much easier now to understand where you can go to find things as opposed to having them kind of buried in a really mega Chapter 9. So, and then speaking to the graphics, we just wanted to, you know, show a few of them. I'm really proud of my team and all of the graphics that we put together for the document, and we spent a lot of time really making sure that they're branded specifically to Pinehurst and using colors, and I hope that this is something that you all are proud of with the graphics that are in here now. Neighborhood meeting, one of the things also that came out of our conversations with the focus group is that one of the recommendations that we're making in the new PDO is that there's now a requirement for neighborhood meetings for different types of development requests within the village. So now mandatory neighborhood meetings will be required for all rezoning applications, any conditional zoning, any major site plan, any major subdivision, And there's also a clause that, any project that would be deemed to have significant community impact, the village planner would have the option to request that meeting. So I think this really goes a long ways to helping notify residents of projects that are going on. And this isn't anything that is uncommon in other communities that we're working in. And the development community is used to having to do these meetings. So I'm really excited that this was something that the focus group endorsed and wanted to see us put in the ordinance.
Yeah, and the intent too was to make sure that the word got out sooner rather than later when there's a potential for what could be seen as a major development project nearby or within a neighborhood, as well as give that opportunity for any type of applicant, builder, developer, and that local community to get that feedback, have that exchange, and incorporate any necessary revisions that could address some of those concerns before everything got so far down the line and before, they're having a presentation here before whatever board or committee within this room. So that was, we think is a big victory with the recommendations we have now, and Cindy and her team were even able to put together an information packet that they were going to be able to just kind of hand out, which we don't have. We believe this is a big improvement.
And then there was a few things that we just kind of wanted to touch on briefly from the last time we met with you, and then when we met with the planning board. We made some revisions to some of the open space standards. Now the ordinance clarifies what can and cannot be included in open space calculations. We added some clarification allocation related to active versus passive features. We also established some requirements in the ordinance related to ownership, management, maintenance of these open space. And then the table on this chart, on this slide, shows examples of what an active feature could be and what a passive feature could be.
Yeah, we really wanted to revamp. We couldn't really make any adjustments to the required amount of open space, especially within residential subdivisions. But what we really wanted to do was to have some sort of standards in how that open space was utilized and how it could be a benefit for whatever that community was, instead of just setting aside a bunch of area that may or may not have been used or could have been incorporated into the residential design anyway, and then just say, there, I've met the minimum requirement. It actually gives a little bit more thought into how that can work for that actual community and being an amenity instead of just something that's just set aside.
The next one is the highway corridor overlay, which I think we discussed a little while ago. So it's what we're calling a paper district, so it will be available if an applicant comes in overseeing property, and hopefully we'll be able to utilize that in the future.
But remind me, what's the definition of a Class 3 buffer?
Is a certain dimension, so it's a little bit wider, a
Based
little
on
bit deeper,
dimensions.
and has a little more stringent landscaping standards. So what we did, since we didn't really get a chance to touch on this much last time with you guys or with the Planning and Zoning Board, in a nutshell, the highway corridor overlay standards have additional or more stringent setbacks. They also have typically a little bit more buffering. The intent especially was to apply that in any of these areas that abut directly up against a residential area. So if you have a more office, institutional, or commercial type development going in that abuts a residential property, you're going to try to have more stringent requirements for the landscaping, for the buffering, for exterior lighting as well, to be scaled back a little bit in those areas. I believe there were also, the bullet there is the simplified parking landscaping requirements, but also where the parking could probably or should probably be located. A lot of these areas access to these are likely going to be dictated by transportation, since most of those are going to have access on a major highway. And they're going to reduce the amount of what they call conflicts, which is entry and exit points in forms of egress. So we didn't get too much into trying to add additional requirements for there. But it's meant to have, again, work as a traditional overlay where there's additional standards on top of all the other applicable standards in the document.
Are there any roads other than 5211 and 15501 where this might apply?
You know, Highway 2 might be an option, but it's, there's kind of limited in where those areas are. An older highway corridor overlay that the village had some standards for Midland Road. But those are the big ones, and again, there's only a few of those where it would really make the most sense, where they're commercially or non-residential zone properties and that are largely vacant.
I was going to say, most of them too is not vacant, even if it were zoned other than
Commercial,
residential.
yes. Mhm.
And then the last one was undisturbed buffers. We wanted to clarify what could be allowed to encroach in buffers, and it's things such as bridges, drainage ditches, utility lines, road crossings, vegetation management, wetland restoration. The ordinance was silent on that currently, and we always understand that there are times in certain designs where you need to be able to encroach into a buffer, so we wanted to specify what those allowable encroachments were, so that makes it a little bit easier for staff when they are having the discussions with the applicant.
Certainly eliminated discretion being applied, and also hoping to have some common sense allowances in these areas.
And then I'm sorry.
Would that apply to the so-called thickets that you sometimes find, particularly in Old Town?
Those standards wouldn't apply there because those aren't necessarily a recognized landscape buffer or a required landscape or some other protected buffer like a wetland or otherwise buffer that would be applied in the watershed regulations. They would be exempt as a existing single-family lot of record prior to 1993.
And then just to kind of recap, mention that we went to Planning and Zoning Board on October 2nd. We received a unanimous recommendation for approval with the provision that we went through and confirmed cross-references and then worked on the Highway Corridor Overlay District. So the draft number 2 was posted following that, and we've just talked about the Highway Corridor Overlay. So then next steps, we're here this evening for the public hearing, anticipating that we may be back before you at your November 18th meeting to discuss the PDO as well as the flood damage prevention ordinance. If the PDO is approved, I believe Alex is recommending an effective date of January 5th of '26. And then following that, we will kick off the engineering standards and specifications manual update.
Logistical question or two. The effective date issue, between the time, if we assume November 18th or even the first week in December approval, does that give you enough time for a January 5th effective date? It does. Okay, I'm assuming you did. You put it in here, but it seems like one, it's the holiday season. Two, there's a lot to put in place.
It's a perfect time for study sessions with staff.
I see. Okay.
But,
Okay.
you know, this is
Hear that,
not-
staff?
They're aware. But you got to recognize, too, we've been in this document or form of this document for almost 6 months now. I'm as familiar with this document now as I am the current one. They're starting, we're going to be at a point where we're going to be ready to really make that transition. And after the first of the year, and that's the first Monday of the new year,
Right.
We don't want to have something adopted and then have something come in overnight first thing in the morning and we're scrambling. Plus, we have to honor what's called permit choice, that the statute prevails. So we want to make sure that we've got enough time to know where we are facilitating, what applications we currently have in the queue, and what we're anticipating coming, and then when those new ones come in.
So ones in queue, can they ask to be reconsidered under the new PDO?
It all depends on when the application was made and then also when staff makes the determination of completeness of an application.
Okay.
But I think you also have language in there about this transition period. If I'm applying and I get all my paperwork under one standard, that is the standard to which I will be held.
And it depends on the timing of when that application comes in. It's not before the rules have changed, because you have a little bit of a period there where an applicant can have the opportunity. That's why it's called permit choice. They can pick which rules they want to apply to, either the ones that we're all comfortable with or the new ones that no one knows.
All right, another question along those lines. What type of rollout do we have for our customers on this?
So our main users, again, are mainly going to be the staff, right? Our larger scale developments are going to always be, there's always a consult with staff before they step forth and put together a, $5,000 application fee and rack up a lot of time and expenditure with consultants to develop those. So we have a communication, and we also have, we have a contact with the local builders. The single-family residential applications are going to be the ones that are mostly impacted. That's sort of our quote-unquote bread and butter, right? Those are our lion's share of our applications that we process. So we're going to have, I've been thinking about getting some communication of those. There's been some conversations we've had. The local home builder association's also been pretty good to disseminate news for that. There's going to be a few things that I expect we would probably like to request a workshop for them to kind of go through for some of the zoning permitting. And there's also some opportunity to lump that in with some of the potential upcoming adoption of the new residential building code. Our group typically holds 1 to 2 builders workshops a year, so we're toying with that idea. Again, the timing will be a little difficult to ensure, but sometimes a lot of the builders at that time they're slowing down a little bit, so they have a little more free time instead of chasing job sites.
Also, we are planning on putting an article in the next newsletter about the PDO. So there's one that comes out in November, so we're like, we wait till it's actually adopted, but I think we're going to have something in that article.
And take me to the flood damage prevention ordinance consideration for adoption.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight that specifically. So our current flood damage prevention ordinance is more outdated than our current PDO. I mean, it's still in the 90s, and it is, if you think the PDO is technical, or if you think the engineering standards are technical, the flood damage prevention ordinance is very technical. It's for a good reason. So these are all properties that would be regulated under any special flood hazard areas, and we have quite a bit of those areas in our jurisdiction. However, currently, and the proposal would be to keep that as a standalone regulatory document. So it's adopted apart from the PDO, so it's not a zoning requirement. It's adopted under sort of our general police powers as we have under our municipal code. And there's a good reason for that they are separate. Some folks, it's split 50-50. Earlier on when we started the project, I asked Cindy if they could do some research of peer groups and see what other areas or jurisdictions are doing. And it is kind of right down the middle. Some include it within their UDO, which is again part of that Unified Development Ordinance, and some keep it separate. My reasoning for wanting to continue to keep those separate is they have very different definitions and how those definitions apply to certain aspects of their regulatory code. So it's best to keep the flood damage prevention ordinance application only for that, and then let the PDO stand alone as it has been. But we definitely are in bad need of getting that updated to the model ordinance. And again, this is nationwide. Depending on which identified flood hazard area you're in and what type of building, the exemptions are all are pretty much all the same, and the definitions are all the same.
What will we be actually adopting then?
That would be a separate agenda item aside from the PDO adoption.
Oh, okay.
Yep, and so it'd be its own ordinance, and it'll have all that information, typically in, the whereas with the preamble, and then the actual document itself, which would just replace the current flood damage prevention ordinance that we have on file.
And Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, but these are pretty standard across, different jurisdictions.
Yeah, again, they're universal. Yep, yep.
This is different than runoff during construction and
Correct.
sedimentation. This is really flood-related issue.
Correct.
And I gather this has to correspond with some state statutes that govern
Federal.
federal statutes, not just state. Okay.
I think with that ends what the brief presentation that we wanted to give you all this evening as an update.
Questions from council for our presenters? Dr. Morgan?
No questions. I've been through the proposal here that was provided. I am amazed on the intricacy and detail that's required in the knowledge base for this. So thank you. And Alex, I know that you've done a lot, and certainly McKinley Horn on there and what's been done. But I think this is a drastic improvement from what we had before. I think, and looking at the goals, this has accomplished the goals. But I will go back to, I'm still amazed by the technical knowledge that's required to construct all this. This is not something somebody can just come off the side of the street and make happen. So thank you very much, and compliments to you.
Yeah, I would, first of all, I would echo Jeff's statement. I certainly don't have the subject matter expertise to dig into section 8.4.16.2 AB, nor do I think that's really our function.
It's actually 14.1.3.
Perfect example, I got it wrong. And I don't think that's really the goal of, and clearly we've had two members of council participating in this whole process. They have sweat equity involved here, and Jack certainly had a lot of involvement prior to this exercise. I am, I don't know whether I should say troubled or confused. Let's start with confused. And that's why I asked the question I did at the beginning about this being a regulatory document, not a visionary document, if you will. We use some different terms at the very beginning of this in what I would call a somewhat visionary statement. It shall be the primary goal of this ordinance to preserve the village's unique visual content. That's not anywhere then in the comp plan. It's not defined. I don't know what it means. So without going into a table of permitted uses and that level of detail, do we need statements like that at all as a preamble to the PDO?
Are they needed? No. They're very standard. And again, that's the general intent language. This is what we're going to aspire to do. We're going to set it up with all this wonderful flowering language before we really get to the meat of the document. It's typical code construction. Again, I couldn't answer the genesis of why development ordinance have those in there, but there's no real application to the general intent. It's just a nice, comforting feeling that when you begin to read, it's the introduction to the document.
We talk about encouraging adherence to that goal. So I think I now understand, because there is no specific standard that we could hold people to as to whether, and I tell you what I'm thinking of generically. We would like, I think, as a current council and next council, to see some development in the next few years in the Village Place area. I think how that gets scaled and does it have to look like what we have in the Central Business District now, or could it look different? And therefore, when you have something about unique visual content, it becomes important to me to understand what it means. Now, this will be discussed at HPC level, it'll be discussed at planning and zoning level. But I'd want to be sure that we are as consistent as we can be in setting the expectational standards. Otherwise, we may end up with a result we didn't anticipate. There was one other specific thing that I came across, again, in this what I will call visionary area. I want to see if I can get it quickly. I know there's standard language to say if there are two different regulations, which one is going to apply. And we talk about, if we can't abrogate a state law or ordinance, but if we have stricter standards, the stricter standards will apply. And conversely, if they have stricter standards than what we write, then the stricter standards will apply in essence in all cases. But if our standards are stricter than a state law, aren't we effectively saying that we will override state law and stick with our standards?
That's not what we should be saying, no.
I would just ask you to look at 1.6A and see whether, that's what it seemed to say to me, but I may be wrong.
Let's just reread it in case that one section, we don't want to, that would send a wrong message if that's.
My last question is we enumerate 8 guidelines that are adopted in accordance with the comprehensive plan, but they're different than the guiding principles. Several are, I would say, philosophically consistent. They just use different words. Several seem to be almost brand new. Is that intentional?
Intentional in that they be different than
That they be different, yes.
Yeah, I think so, yes. Again, we kind of touched on a little bit with, the earlier question. The comprehensive plan is meant to have be a vision for several things. This is a little bit more defined vision, if you will, than all those that were listed in the comprehensive plan. Certainly, there's going to be some similarities there, but there's also going to be a little bit more specific to cohesive development.
That's what I want to do to Alex all the time.
Likewise.
Okay, and a couple of other more minute things, which I will email you both. Thanks, appreciate it.
To our veterans here, we'll start with Barb and then follow with Jack, who have been with this from day one, and we appreciated their work. And go ahead, King.
I promised Alex today I was not going to ask him any more questions, and so I'm not. What I am going to say, though, is that Cindy is right. It was a lot of homework and a lot of work, but what we did paled in comparison to what you did and your staff, and for that we are eternally grateful. Thank you.
Jack, you were around here back when Mr. Tufts put together the original draft. What's your thoughts?
There was no development ordinance. Built the village in 5 months. So, no, I think what we have today is a far more understandable and logical way to look at the various issues. I mean, whether it be signs or landscaping or you name it. They were so intertwined before, and it was so complex to try to understand and separate the various issues. Just separating it and creating all these new chapters really simplified greatly, because a lot of people come in and they're only interested in a sign issue, and they had to find their way, where's the sign issue? Somewhere in chapter 9, maybe, who knows. It certainly makes it much easier for the developers and even day-to-day people who want to do something within their property. So I think it's a much more useful document. I know when we started on this effort a year ago, we took a little bit of heat from some other outside organizations claiming that we were trying to actually put the brakes on development. Well, far from it, because our current development ordinance stayed in place and people were able to execute within that. It's just that this is an easier way for people to, easier for us and easier for developers and the community to understand what we're looking for. You know, what is the setback? You know, if you want to do something, you can more easily find it within the document. I will say the current document, I think, is 141 pages, but it happens to be in 6 font. So just by changing it to readable 11 or 12 font, double the size of the document. But and then along with all the graphics, added some volume, but it's much more useful volume. So I think we're just about there. We have a couple final edits to do. They're nothing meaningful to my knowledge, just some usual proofreading at the end. But I think we're going to have an adoption draft. Hopefully, we're going to see that fairly shortly. So we should be ready in November to go ahead with this.
Okay. I just have a couple of brief questions. One, on the flood damage prevention ordinance, I would appreciate maybe a brief memo or something that you can provide to the council. I feel a little foggy about the topic. I understand.
Wait till you read it.
I understand. Which is why I'd like to get something in writing that I can study a little bit. So I would appreciate that. And then this may be for our village attorney, when we put together a document like this, does it contain a severability clause?
The actual ordinance adoption will, the
Yep.
ordinance itself that you adopt will have that too, yes.
Thank you, thank you. I didn't see it. I'm obviously impressed with the sort of thoroughness, and it is easier to understand than the previous one. There's no question about that. I also think it's a big deal, and I think when we roll this out, we ought to point out the addition of these neighborhood meetings so that the residents know they do have a stake and a role in this, and in the past, they may not have. And now there's going to be no excuses because they're going to be, in essence, right in on the takeoff as well as the landing. I also think the graphics are very easy to understand, and perhaps those are types of things that we can replicate in the newsletter or on the website, again, so that folks can understand that it is easy. And I like the idea of sort of the rollout with the newsletter and the home builder customer education effort, because we will have accomplished something significant, and it should make everyone's work a little easier, whether you're building a home, administering the PDO, or you're just doing research. It should be helpful. So with that, we can, obviously now we're in a public hearing still, and we would like to see if there's anybody, unless you all have anything else you want to add. Let's see if we have some folks who signed up.
Thanks, guys, appreciate it.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Bill Colmer from Pinewell. Come forward, Bill.
Well, good evening again. I'm Bill Calmer. I live at 34 Pomeroy Drive in Pinewell, and I would like to give you a little context about how I came into the review of the Pinehurst Development Ordinance. I was not on the focus group, and so my first look at this was when the September draft was released, and I had the opportunity and took it to review this document, in context with the current PDO, and to try to map my way through it, which wasn't always easy. As you've noticed, it's a fairly large document. Fortunately, it's only about half the size of the original published version of Gone with the Wind, but it's still large. I think I want to echo some of the comments that I've heard you make. I believe that this document is a real improvement. As a person who, because of various roles and whatever, actually uses the PDO. I'm in that thing a lot. And this version of the PDO, I believe, is going to ultimately make compliance with the ordinance easier and more streamlined. I honestly believe that the people who are developing, the people who own homes and want to change something about their homes will have an easier way to determine what their requirements are. Having said that, there are still a few things that could be fixed, and I have provided a series of comments to Alex. And I know that they're going to take a look at them, and I know they're going to take care of them. But since you are the deciders, I have a plea to you, and that is that you all take a look at this thing from the broad brush view. Does this document really do what we wanted, what you believe the citizens of Pinehurst want in terms of setting the standards for the future? Does it really comply with the comprehensive plan? I believe it does, but that's your call. That's your job. So I urge you to do that, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. Is there anybody else who care to come forward? Christine, please introduce yourself.
This is a minor comment. My name is Christine Danino. I'm an architect here in town. And I really encourage you to think about the flood hazard damage ordinance, because I'm going to all these architecture conferences, and it used to be we were talking about green design, how to make the building sustainable. Now all the conferences are, how do we mitigate flooding? How do we mitigate risks? How do we create a resilience center so that if the power goes out, the people in the community can get access to phones, get access to electricity. I'm hearing a lot right now about crawl spaces that have ductworks in them that are getting moldy and mildewy because of the water. And a lot of people are having, they need to have battery backups in some pumps and stuff. So anyways, I think that's going to be really critical for your leadership in the future, and I'm just hearing about it so much. So, and I'm also wondering about fire risk. I don't think we're as much a risk for that here, but anyways, just those are my 2 cents. That's it. But otherwise, I think it's beautiful, well-written, way easier to understand set of rules, and I really think they did a great job with it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. Anybody else who'd like to come forward? Yes, please.
Hi, Virginia Douglas, 105 Linden Trail. I'm just curious I just wanted to confirm, and I didn't see it in the document, does that cover the ETJ, and are the neighborhood meetings also for anything happening in the ETJ? So I wasn't really clear on that. And my second thing would just be, it'd be, if possible, a red line showing that old document with the really small font and how it's been changed would make it easier for the average person trying to look at that. Would just be one suggestion I'd make, although I know it's dramatically different, but it is awfully user-friendly in its current proposed, so that is appreciated. Thank you.
I believe it applies to ETJ.
Yeah. The PDO applies to both
Village.
the village and the ETJ, yes.
Now,
Yeah.
on the second part of her question, the red line issue.
Red line, so
What do we?
as much as I would love to be able to provide a red line, it really is truly impossible because it is too different and it's in very different sections. If you want to come and sit down with us, we can, point out. Yeah, so it is a little hard, yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you for raising that, though. Anybody else? It's open mic right now. No? Okay. That's quite a good size interest in a PDO from the residents. So
One comment,
Go ahead, Jack.
on the question, and I think it relates to Mr. Colmer's comment a little bit, is there was a lot of things that we would have liked to do within the PDO, a lot of changes we would have liked to make relative to our development ordinance. But the reality is we are, because of some legislatures, actions that have taken in Raleigh, we are prohibited from doing those. So you may think that why didn't you prohibit this, or why didn't you change this and so forth. We are very restricted as to what we actually can do within the PDO as far as changes go. So I think people should recognize that at some point in time. If the legislation weren't there and we had a free rein, some of the changes might have been made, but we had to stick within what we're allowed to do.
thank you for reminding everybody about that. Okay. I'm ready to accept the motion.
Just a generic, what is the difference between closing the public meeting now and reopening it at our next meeting versus leaving it open until then? I'm not sure I understand why we would do one versus the other.
So if you wanted to have more public comment at the next meeting, you would just, you wouldn't close it completely and adjourn it, you would just close it and reopen.
It would be available to us.
Yeah.
I think it's a safety net. I view it that way.
Right, I think it would be fine to close it now and then have it reopened at our next meeting.
We'll have our regular public comment period anyway as
Oh,
well.
hold on, we have
All right.
Alex to the
Unless
rescue.
Alex wants to correct me.
Dissenting opinion here.
This is important, actually.
Okay, so statutorily, you are required to hold, the governing board, to hold a public hearing before you can consider adoption. You're kind of at the end of that public hearing. You can, and we probably should have included a couple of slides to kind of help conclude the agenda item to give your options. So your options are, if you would like to receive more public comment in a public hearing, then you would need to continue the public hearing to a time and date certain. If you believe that you have received the public comment that you need on the subject matter, then you can go ahead and close the public hearing. You have met that requirement, and then you can take action on any adoption at a later and subsequent meeting.
Why can't we close it and then open it again? Can't you open it twice?
We would have to
have to
reschedule a
notice
new
it.
public hearing. That's
No,
a whole new hearing.
I said it wrong. I should have said continue it instead of close and reopen. You can continue it to the next meeting.
Right.
Leaving aside the issue of further public comment, by leaving it open, does that allow the introduction of additional material that you might come up with in conjunction with Kimley Horn?
I would expect there are going to be some final edits that take place anyway. Keeping it open would allow for that. Closing it would not prohibit it, so it could still continue.
We would be adopting whatever the most current version draft is at that point in time. Is that correct?
Yes, and now if the document changed substantially, where all of a sudden we removed all landscaping requirements, then by all means, it would arguably need a new public hearing and receive public comment on that. But if you're talking about final editorial changes that are needed, then that does not require, and largely probably shouldn't, need additional public comment in a public hearing. Now, the public and anyone who is still interested will still be able to comment and provide those comments to staff and to you guys up until adoption.
And we will have a public comment period, as we normally do in every meeting, at the next meeting. Someone could comment that period of time if they had a comment relevant to the PDO.
We have almost 3 weeks between the next council meeting. That's sufficient time to make any necessary changes or revisions based on any comment we need or any final edits that we're able to.
I'm much more comfortable just leaving it open till
Just
the next
continue it
meeting.
to the next meeting.
Do a continuation?
Yeah,
I agree with that.
continuation. Yeah, just,
Ultimately, it'll be fine.
So then someone needs to move to continue the public hearing until the next council meeting on
November 18th. Yeah, there's a
First
motion.
November 18th.
And state the time and the location here too, within that motion.
Okay. Someone want to,
I move to continue the public hearing to the November 18th, 2025 council regular meeting at the Pinehurst Village Hall Auditorium.
we have a motion?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we have a motion to continue.
Mr. Mayor, before we move on to a different topic, can I bring up two quick items?
Go right ahead.
So we talked about deer fencing as part of this PDO. The way we have it currently is that we made some minor adjustments to fence heights and front yards, but mostly we are going to consider netting that would actually keep a deer from eating a new foliage as something that is not considered a fence. So that is the way that we're moving forward with the PDO. I know this was kind of an issue a few months ago. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with that. I see 5 head nods, so.
Okay, as long as the deer folks are,
Yeah.
Barb and Jeff,
Thank you.
okay, okay.
Yep, okay.
The deer folks. Thank you.
And then the very last thing, which would require a municipal code change in the near future, is throughout the document, it's called zoning board of adjustments.
Oh, yeah.
So if we just want to cut out the zoning and call it board of adjustments, we need to make a municipal code change as well.
Let's
I
please
think
do that.
that's,
And I didn't mention the item with the very first Chapter 1 item. Can that be
Yeah,
corrected
we
too?
can look at that. Yeah.
Okay.
Concur.
Again, it's a wording thing.
Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure, and now I'm good.
Okay, you're fine then? We're fine? All right.
I think for the next, we needed to have a motion, though, to depart from the public hearing and go back into the regular meeting.
We will need that, yes. Or, no,
Okay.
because we continued it, we won't need to.
We don't need to.
No.
Yeah, because it was continued, yeah.
So do we now have to have a motion on the regular meeting? Because we had to recess it
No,
before.
we are just,
We are currently recessed per the last motion. I'm not the expert on motions, though.
let's make a motion
I think
to
the
reconvene the
continuation
council meeting.
closes that item, is that correct?
Okay.
Okay.
And so we are back in the regular meeting.
All righty.
Okay, if the rally motion police get us, I'm just, making the pointer.
Okay. All right. Let us then proceed to item number 8, resolutions. We have a resolution here to consider, a resolution 25-47, updating the Neighborhood Advisory Committee policy. We discussed this a couple of weeks ago. Doug, you want to give us the once-over?
Very simply, at our last meeting, we changed all committees to be 3-year terms. So this policy said something different, so we're updating that. And also, it referenced that the village clerk was the main staff point for this. We've now changed that, so we are making it more generic and not referring directly to the village clerk, has to do all the work related to this.
Okay.
For some reason, Shannon wanted that changed. in this
Was the
policy.
village clerk okay with that? That's okay. All right. A motion, and we can move on from that.
I move to approve Resolution 2547, updating the Neighborhood Advisory Committee policy.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion adopted. Okay. Move this over here. Now we're going to item 9, which is regular business. Item A is a presentation of the FY 2025 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report and Audit Results. Yes. Okay. Dana, welcome. Please introduce your colleague, and we'll go.
Good evening, Council. I have with me Mr. Chad Cook from Forvis Mazars, our auditor, and we are here to present the results of our audit for fiscal year 2025. It is the culmination of a little over 3 months' worth of work for our department, so it's a big milestone to be able to check this one off the list, and I'm very pleased. You'll hear more about it from Mr. Cook, but very pleased that we have yet again a clean audit opinion for this year.
Thank you, Dana. And again, my name's Chad Cook, and I'm an audit director with Forvis Mazars out of our Greensboro, North Carolina office, and I'm the lead auditor on the village's audit for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2025. I appreciate the opportunity to present the results of that audit tonight. And really, before I begin, I'd like to thank Dana and the finance team. We know that the audit process is lengthy. There's a ton of documentation to pull for us, and as usual, the records are in great shape, and they were ready for us, at the agreed upon time, and just makes the whole process go very smoothly. So definitely appreciative to her and her team. Before tonight's meeting, you should have received 2 documents. One was the annual comprehensive financial report for the village for the year ended June 30th, 2025. That's the 100-page document that includes the village's financial statements for the year. And then the second document would be this, which is that there was the required communications that we have. So it's our report to the village council, and that this just contains communications that we are required to communicate to you all as those charged with governance for the village following the conclusion of our audit. This will be the focus of my presentation tonight. I'm not going to read through it word for word, but I've got some bullet points kind of summarized that you'll see within this document. And then certainly once I'm done with that, if anyone has any questions about the audit process or anything within the financial statements that you're able to review, we'd be happy to go through that at that point. So I'll start first. Again, the financial statements have been completed, and they have been submitted to the North Carolina Local Government Commission. The financial statements are subject to their review and approval. However, we have not received any comments from them that led to any changes in, I guess, ever to my knowledge, but technically they do have to approve the final financial statements. So it's in their court now. Technically, the due date on that is now December 31st. It used to be October 31st. Would have met the deadline either way, but it's now in their court. So I imagine we should be one of the first ones in, and I would expect them to be able to review those pretty quickly. Jumping into our report, first I want to speak a little bit to the audit scope and responsibilities. And so our audit was conducted in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards as well as government auditing standards. Our responsibility is to express an opinion on whether the financial statements prepared by management and overseen by the council are presented fairly in accordance with U.S. GAAP or generally accepted accounting principles within the United States. It's important to note that an audit provides a reasonable but not absolute assurance, and it does not include a detailed test of all transactions of the village. So certainly we consider materiality within our audit, and perform multiple tests from substantive analytics, detailed tests, depending on the different financial statement areas, but we do not test 100% of transactions, so I do like to point that out. Secondly, key communications and results. We issued, as Dana mentioned, an unmodified or clean audit opinion for the year ended June 30th, 2025. We're also required to issue additional reports as required by government auditing standards, as well as the North Carolina State Single Audit Implementation Act. So because the village expended more than $500,000 in state awards for the year, we had to do also a compliance audit over the village's major state programs. This year, similar to prior years, it was the Powell Bill program. And happy to report, as a result of that audit, we had no findings as it relates to non-compliance with the grant program, and no findings related to internal controls over compliance either. Moving on, significant accounting policies and changes. We do like to point out that the village did adopt a couple of new accounting standards this year. So the first one you'll see there, GASB Statement Number 101, Compensated Absences. This was really sort of a rewrite on a previous standard, and it changes how liabilities for various types of leave are recognized and measured. And so the adoption resulted in a restatement of beginning net position for governmental activities in the financial statements, where we increased the previously reported liability for compensated absences by about $1.5 million. And so that's, it was not an error correction. This was a new standard, a new way of doing things. And basically the big change was now you have a liability for sick leave on the financial statements, whereas previously you only had a liability for accrued vacation, which is paid out.
So this is a biggie. Can you tell me what that means relative to our operating budget, on a year-to-year basis? Or it will impact our operating budget on a year-to-year basis at some point in time in the future?
Without getting too technical, this liability is only in your government-wide financial statements, which are reported at the full accrual level. And so it does not impact your modified accrual or your budgetary basis statements, and I doubt that it's going to impact your operations very much either. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
It's not changing what we pay when someone terminates.
Right, of course.
Or, the rate at which we pay their sick or vacation time as they use it. So it is not going to change, our general fund operating budget or what we're expending for that, what we're paying any individual person as a result of this standard.
But as the standards or percentages or discount rates change, this seems to grow on a yearly basis significantly. Accrued amounts
So
for
this is
either
the
vacations
accrued
or,
vacation, or accrued compensated absences has been fairly consistent year over year. It's the pension liabilities that change significantly, I think, with the changes in discount rates. This is really just an estimate of the sick time that employees have already earned, how much of that will they use before they leave. And so it
Different
will be paid out, but not in a check on their termination date. It'll be paid out as they use it. So it's a new liability that's being captured that just hadn't been before.
okay, thank you.
All right, and then the second new standard this year was GASB Statement Number 103, which the village elected to implement in fiscal year 2025. And that standard just enhances the clarity and the usefulness of the financial reports, which included some changes to the management's discussion and analysis section. You'll see that that's a little more robust than it has been in previous years. So it's kind of a reorganization of that section, which it's the section of the financial statements where management can really kind of get into the narrative form of what happened during the year and really kind of dive into operational results and things that you may see coming. And so just an expansion to that, and then there's also sort of a reorganization in terms of the presentation of budgetary comparison schedules, which are now included as supplemental schedules, whereas in the prior year they may have been at the front of the financial statements. So if you're comparing last year's report to this year's report, you may notice some changes in the exhibit numbers and where things are located, and it was a result of that new standard that was implemented. All right, moving on. The other thing we like to point out, or another thing we like to point out, is that the financial statements do contain significant estimates as well as significant disclosures. The significant estimates within the financial statements include the useful lives of capital assets, discount rates for lease liabilities, pension liabilities, as we just mentioned, with discount rates, as well as the associated deferred inflows and outflows. And then the percentage of accrued sick leave, now this is the new one, which is expected to be used, which is a component of your accrued compensated absences. In terms of sensitive disclosures, those include pension plans and also just the post-employment obligations. So there's, again, lots of information. The footnotes go on for several pages just describing those pension plans and the detail that goes into those calculations. So we do just like to point those out. Audit adjustments and findings. There were no significant unusual transactions that we discovered as a result of our audit. No alternative accounting treatments that were used, and we had no disagreements with management in terms of accounting treatment for certain transactions during the course of the audit. Additionally, if we were to have any significant adjustments in the audit, so material corrections to the trial balance that we receive for audit, we would be required to report that. Happy to report we had no such adjustments in the audit this year. Uncorrected misstatements, again, if we were to find misstatements that maybe weren't material, but nonetheless we pointed out to management and they elected not to make those corrections, we would be required to report those. There are no uncorrected misstatements within the financial statements either that we noted during our audit. We did not encounter any significant difficulties during the audit, and nor did we find any fraud or significant related party transactions that were previously undisclosed. One other thing we'd like to point out, the village also has no what we call financial performance indicators of concern. So following the completion of the audit, we have to go through a data submission process to the North Carolina Local Government Commission. And they've kind of pre-populated based on the financial data you give them. Are there any potential performance indicators that you might need to provide responses to them on? And the village had no financial performance indicators of concern that you'll be required to respond to the LGC on this year. Lastly, other information. So we do like to point out that the annual comprehensive financial report includes both an introductory section as well as statistical information at the back, so lots of demographic information about the village. And we do not provide an opinion over that, so we just like to point out that there is other information within the report which our opinion does not extend to. However, we do read through that and make sure that there are no material inconsistencies with the audited financial statements. So if there are figures in there that refer to the financial statements, we'll make sure that they're right. But aside from that, we do like to point out that we're not auditing the statistical or demographic information that's in the report. So in summary, the audit went smoothly. We found the village's financial statements to be presented fairly in all material respects. And again, just want to thank the finance team for their professionalism and support throughout the process, and also the village council and management for working with our firm again for the audit for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2025. And with that, that's the conclusion of my presentation, but certainly, again, happy to answer any questions you may have about the audit process or financial statements.
Now, when do you kick off the audit for FY 2026?
Typically, we do interim procedures in May, so it'd be May 26th, and then we come out for final field work at the beginning of August. Yeah.
Questions, colleagues?
You noted no difficulties in completing the audit. Were there any areas of significance that you had to spend more time on this year versus the past, maybe as the result of changing regulations or what have you?
Certainly, yes. With GASB 101, which was a change in compensated absences, the standard did require you to implement that as of the end of the last fiscal year. So we had to do, or Dana and team rather, had to do the calculation as of June 30th, 2024 and 2025. And so we had conversations about that. Dana had to come up with the implementation memo and just documenting the village's methodology there. And then that required our team to test that as of June 30th, 2024 and 25. So looking back at payroll records and things like that. And so, yeah, a little expanded scope there. That tends to be what the GASB does. They like to take what you've got and then add a little bit more to it each year. So,
thank you.
I just want to throw kudos out to the finance team. So, Dana, great job and on doing it. We certainly appreciate the audit for that. But you're continuing an excellent standard for the village. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I want to give a kudos to council because you had 500 pages to read this past week, so way to go. But only 100 from this. So.
but we understood all of it.
Yeah, yep.
And,
Way easier to understand than a PDO.
no.
Every one of the 605 pages.
My thanks, too, for the great job that you all do.
Always good to get a clean bill of health. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
Right.
All
Thank
right,
you.
that concludes that. Item A,
Could I propose a 5-minute recess?
no objection here, 5-minute recess. Okay, welcome back. We are returned to item 9, regular business B, the discussion regarding the traffic circle following the NCDOT public meeting. I think many of the council members probably have something to say. I know I do, so I will kick this off. I think almost all of us stopped by at some period on Tuesday night at the Fair Barn and saw a lot of our fellow citizens there, and saw a lot of the red shirt team there from NCDOT answering as many questions as they could. So obviously this is an issue that's been around here since June of 2022, because I remember the first time we had a council presentation here. Dr. Morgan, you and I were rookies, and it was about a 2 to 2.5 hour presentation, slideshow, very well done, professional, and that sort of opened the discussion for this topic, at least during my time on the council. So let me begin by thanking the NCDOT for the public meeting early this week on their latest proposal as an alternative to the current Pinehurst traffic circle. I have given this thought, and I have 4 points I'd like to cover. One is I think it's important that we have a brief historical overview of how we reached this point. 2, the importance of public comments. 3, some of my own observations, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then next steps as I see them. By way of background, as I mentioned a moment ago, in June of 2022, 6 months into mine and Dr. Morgan's joining the Village of Pinehurst Council, we heard our first presentation from NCDOT on a recommendation for what was then called the Continuous Flow Interchange, CFI. It was about a 2.5 hour presentation, and it was, as I said, a very thorough presentation. When it was done, there were various comments that came quickly out of the mouths of some of us. One member of the council commented that after he had seen the diagrams and drawings, it felt like someone stuck a knife in her heart. And she said the circle is part of our character. I commented that the proposal looked like in order to save the circle, we needed to destroy it first. 6 months later, the village sent a formal letter to DOT indicating we were unable to support the options they presented. But we offered 10 suggestions for immediate improvements. To our delight, they agreed on 2 of them, and by January of 2024, they installed those lane dividers along the circle that separate those lanes, those sort of rubber sticky things that seem to have stood the test of time. And they installed some clearer overhead signage. As people approach the circle, you'll notice the word "only" from time to time. That was not there 2 years ago, and particularly for newcomers, they would be in the wrong lane and realize it too late, and then they would try to swap lanes. 3 months later, in February of 2024, NCDOT announced a new proposal, and it was identified as the shifted pillow. That included the taking of parcels of private property, the cutting off of the historical Midland Road access to the circle from the Village of Pinehurst, and lots of traffic signals and very few trees remaining. By June, many Pinehurst residents became active with yard signs and meetings and letters to the editor. They improve the circle, don't destroy it. We were all recipients of a variety of emails, and I'm sure like many of you, I was often pigeonholed it at a public event or something about the circle. NCDOT then, in July, held a meeting, public meeting like they did the other night. They held 3 then. They held one at the Pinehurst Elementary School, one at Aberdeen, and one at Carthage. And about 1,000 residents showed up, and largely voicing opposition, which had been building to the shifted pillow. In August of 2024, after all those things occurred, public input, public hearings, this council unanimously adopted a resolution opposing the shifted pillow. We found an unusual group of allies. All 3 of the area garden clubs adopted their own resolutions. The pilot editorialized critical of the shifted pillow and did praise NCDOT for accomplishing something that no one else had ever been able to do, and that was to unite every faction in the village of Pinehurst to agree on something. So, of course, our resolution offered to meet and discuss other alternatives with DOT. We had never just closed the door. We knew we needed to continue the discussion because we, too, wanted improvements to that traffic circle. So in October of 2024, we sent a formal letter to DOT. Once again, we had sent one back in January of 2023, to DOT with some specific suggestions, again, for improvements, some similar to the ones that were in the January 2023 letter that had not been taken up by the NCDOT. The pilot actually ran an editorial on October 29th calling for smaller changes at the circle, like the Village of Pinehurst Council had suggested, which was a pleasant surprise. In June of 2025, NCDOT rolled out their newest proposal. Councilman Taylor, myself, and Village Manager Doug Willardson, we began meeting with DOT officials, and Tuesday night, this past Tuesday, was the public hearing. We had at least 2 pretty lengthy visits up there in Carthage, swapped ideas and suggestions, and posed questions, and we provided answers back and forth. So that's what occurred in the last 3 years. That's a Reader's Digest version, but that's what occurred. The second item I wanted to touch on is what I'll call public comments. I want to drive home the point, which I've heard from my colleagues from time to time, of how important public comments are. That was very apparent when we went through the shifted pillow discussion. This new proposal, as mentioned earlier, the comment period closes November 12th. So for those of you who are listening or here, please provide your comments to DOT on their website. Some of you provided them right there at the public meeting the other night. I saw people doing that. And please comment to members of this council. Your views are very important to us. They help shape our thinking. I know they helped shape mine last time. Third item was a few observations. I went back to the original press release that DOT put out a few years ago about their goal. The DOT's stated goal is, quote, to move traffic more safely and efficiently through the circle. That is their goal, an admirable goal. At this point, I'm not convinced that the proposed design does that. I am convinced the additional circle proposed for Airport Road and the restricted access now placed on Beaver Lane are very good ideas, which were not in their previous proposal. And I know we specifically talked to them about Beaver Lane, so they were responsive to that issue, of making sure that that access continued for the residents who live there. I think it's a good idea that they're planning to widen 15501 North to Carthage from 2 lanes to 4. It's a very good idea. That road is the only 2-lane road of the 5 roads that go into the circle. Every other road is 4 lanes. So you're guaranteed a longer backup there. They're indicating that they will be doing that at the same time they're planning to work on the circle, but again, I think that's a good idea. And I think the allowing of continued access from our historic Midland Road to the circle is a very needed correction from the last, the shifted pillow proposal. And again, it was something that we, both in the resolution we adopted and in our conversations with them, had recommended. So thank you, NCDOT. The current circle, getting back to their stated purpose, more safely, move traffic more safely and efficiently through the circle. The current circle has not recorded a fatality in its 65 years of existence. It's quite an interesting fact. The proposed plan will have 3 intersections and 20-plus traffic lights. Circles are safer than traffic-lighted intersections. That's not my opinion. I stole that from the Federal Highway Administration and the North Carolina Department of Transportation. And if you notice, they're adding a circle at Airport Road. And I think that's good because it'll be safer there. I've literally seen a traffic accident at Airport Road when people are, if you know, where they're trying to get quickly down towards the airport or to St. Hills Community College, and you've got those people coming towards the circle. If they don't see both lanes, I saw it happen once. Now, the design as presented, there is not a similar design in North Carolina for a 5-spoke circle. And I remind everybody that this is the 20th different design put forth by NCDOT since 2014. So this is the first time we've seen this version, but probably because they went back to the drawing board and were trying to come up with something new, of which, as I said, there are things in there that are, I think, very constructive. And lastly, I am still uncomfortable because I cannot determine for sure, and they haven't been able to express with certainty, just how much private property will need to be taken from residents for this specific proposal. Last time, it was more. They were much more specific. This time, what I'm hearing is it's going to be less. I think, then again, that is a step in the right direction. But for me, that private property thing is these are residential properties, backyards and so forth. That's a touchy subject. All these points aside, construction is not planned to start until 2031. There's not a sense of urgency. 6 years from now, we might all be flying around just like George Jetson with a power pack on our back. We don't know what the world's going to like. 6 years ago, who had AI? So I'm obviously being a little facetious there. I don't expect any of us to have power packs and being like George Jetson. But my point is, that's a long horizon. So I view myself as a bit of an incrementalist. I don't understand why we should wait 6 years for the construction to start without taking what I'll call easier steps in the meantime to improve the safety and the efficient flow of traffic, whether it's actually adding a speed limit in the circle, whether it's putting some rumble strips down to keep drivers a little more alert as they approach the circle, maybe earlier signage for cars approaching the circle, maybe other ideas that my colleagues have or that residents have. There's constantly residents. I met a few of them at the meeting the other night who come up to me with an idea. They're very excited about their idea. And most of the ideas I've heard before, but these are residents who are seriously, when they come up with an idea, what I hear them saying to me is please, try not to have the circle too divvied up. And here's my idea that might help you. So finally, as going forward, what I'm recommending, at least this evening for my colleagues, is that after the election of 2 new council members, at our next meeting, I would like to designate John Taylor and one of the new members who's elected to carefully review the comments and start meeting with NCDOT during the first quarter of 2026 and see if we can settle on a solution that is practical for all concerned and will be a roadmap that will move traffic more safely and efficiently and minimize any negative impact to the special character of our village and the integrity of our National Historic Landmark. So those are my thoughts that I literally scribbled out this morning. And I thank you for your indulgence, and I will defer to my colleagues for any other comments, and we can also pose questions to one another, but I'll turn to my right. John Taylor, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think the thrust of the article that the pilot put out on Wednesday, I think it was in the updated version, I don't think it was in the main paper, that comments were generally favorable is accurate as far as it goes. People like this a lot better than they liked the proposal of a year ago. I would say I'm in the same camp myself.
Less ugly.
But less destructive, less ugly, less urban. A lot of, and the introduction of the traffic circle at Airport Road and Midland Road. There are a lot of things where this is a step in the right direction, let's call it that. And I would credit public input as being very responsible for that. But the thought came to me as I was talking to people walking around is we have 2 different people coming at the same problem with a different set of priorities. From the DOT standpoint, it's about engineering. And they're making forecasts, how much traffic and so forth and so on, and expected wait times and whatever. And it's all driven by numbers. People's objections are largely on aesthetics. I didn't have a single person come up to me yesterday who had any real forecast of their own. They think it's too high, it's too low, whatever. A number of them said, you can draw a parallel to what is proposed, which is 6 lanes connecting 211 and Midland Road east of the circle, 2 through lanes and 2 left turn lanes, is what they now have at 15501 and Morganton Road. It's 6 lanes there. And every single person that I spoke with, every single one who goes through that intersection all says wait times have gone up since they introduced that. And this is before we've had any large increase in population in the apartment buildings along Morganton Road and so forth. And my own experience would mirror that. If you get in one of those left turn lanes and you're too late for the sensor to know that you're there, and you have to wait an entire cycle through there, it doesn't matter whether it's 6:30 in the morning or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll be sitting there 2.5 minutes, because that's what it takes to go through the full cycle. And they're forecasting what they think is a higher volume area, that whether it does a better job or not at peak times, there's going to be larger waits during non-peak times. And is that the trade-off that people should really be looking at? My own questions were, why this design? It was not one of the 14 that was studied a year ago in the 431-page document that the DOT's consultant did. It still feels pretty urban. There's this 6-lane highway. And there are several questions which they still can't answer. Pat referenced one. As 211 comes down into the traffic circle, it's 2 lanes currently. It's going to need to be 4 lanes in this proposal. Each lane is 12 feet, so that's another 24 feet that they need, plus a right-of-way. It's round numbers, 40 feet additional space that they'll need. And that's going to impact possibly, because no one will say for sure, some of the backyards of the people on Morganton. Now, last year they were talking about having properties taken by eminent domain. Now they're talking about a sliver of the backyard being taken. And someone asked the question, well, if there are really going to be 80,000 cars a day going through the circle, what's the noise level going to be? And I actually found out who the person is who will do the noise survey and spent a good bit of time talking to him, understand the basis on which they do it and how they do it and so forth. But they can't really say yet exactly where that line is going to be. So that's just one example of some of the unanswered questions. The Department of Transportation is in the process, has been in the process for a year now of updating their transportation demand model. And part of what happens when they finally get the model right is they go to all the municipalities and they ask them to make some 20, 25-year forecasts on population, employment, so forth. Doug, I know, has done ours. I actually spoke with Scott Walston last night at the meeting. He's pretty, I think at the upcoming SMPO Technical Coordinating Committee meeting, which is next Wednesday, he's got them all for all but a couple for the communities in the SMPO, and he believes that for the parts of Moore County not in the SMPO, those are all done. So it's going to be interesting to see what those population forecasts are, how they square with what the state demographer is forecasting and so forth. And that brings me back to something that Pat said. This is not something that a decision needs to be made today. They're not going to do right-of-way acquisition until 2027. They're not going to stick a shovel in the ground until 2031, after the next set of U.S. Opens. So I personally believe that there can still be room for improvement here, that although they called this the final design, they called last year's the final design also. I agree with Pat, and I'd be happy to serve on. I think we've been effective as a council designating 2 people to work as a subcommittee. You know, Barb and Jeff on Deer, and the 2 of you on Jack and Barb on PDO. I think if we designate 2 people to sit down with the DOT and take a look at what the public comments are when we know what they are, because that period doesn't close until November 12th, and see whether there isn't further ways to improve on this, whether it's one of the previous designs or modifications to this design. The DOT has been very public about the fact that they want there to be public support for this. This is not going to be an imposed solution, and I think that's why public comment will be critical. It's a step in the right direction, as I said earlier. I think maybe there's room for further change, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you. Dr. Morgan.
Lots been said there. I won't rehash much of it. Traffic circle, to go back to what John mentioned there, you got engineers talking about flow, volume, and you also have talking about aesthetics. They're not engaging because of the aesthetics, they're engaging because of flow. It serves 2 purposes. You have to move traffic, and you also want a pretty entrance into Pinehurst, and they're trying to work with that. I totally agree that they have worked to try to make sure Pinehurst is satisfied, and I think they're going to continue to do that. I thought about a year and a half ago we had the conversation, and basically, John, you and Pat were going to be representing us, this 2-person type of thing that's been going on.
Yeah, that's
what. And I think where the new council comes on, that's a smart decision to do that, to continue with that. The one other thing I would bring up in association with that is that I think that the relationship that Pinehurst has had with NCDOT is one that probably could be improved upon. And just the respect issues back and forth, communication, things like that with that. And so I think the council, for the new people that come on board, certainly to be able to focus on that and enhance that and have the communication flow going back and forth would be helpful for us. I think it was great. I was at the meeting, saw a variety of people putting in comments. Clearly, it makes a difference. Thank you for putting in those comments, and thank you to the NCDOT for taking those comments and hopefully being able to improve and have a design that we improve upon. The biggest issue I have, and though I'm rotating off the council, I maintain this concern, and that's of eminent domain, and that was brought up. And so I was pleased to see that it's improved from before, chagrined to see that there are still some aspects associated with that. One thing, when I asked the question, they did say this is the worst case scenario, and we're not sure about this, how much is going to be 5 feet, 10 feet, that kind of stuff. That's still not a full answer for us. And so we need to drive on that more, and I would encourage the next council to certainly be focused with that. So thank you. That's all I have.
And Jeff, I would say that I think in the discussions Pat and I have had, they've been good discussions. They've been very open, and I think the relationship is improving, and there's more work to be done there. Agree with that.
Thank you.
Barbara Ficklin, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I agree with everything everyone has said. In addition to that, I would like to point out one other goal that the village has had, in addition to focusing on aesthetics, is also focusing on the quality of life of the people who are going to be affected by anything we do. This particular recommendation has traffic lights, as was presented, which means that there will be stop-and-go movement within that perimeter 24 hours a day. And assuming that we widen all the roads coming in there and we have increased capacity through the intersection, that means a lot more traffic 24 hours a day, including at night. And if you've ever been around a major intersection where it's stop and go all night long and there's truck traffic, you hear a lot of downshifting, you hear a lot of stop and go. It is very aggravating. And one of our residents pointed out the fact that that stop and go and 24-hour activity will impact the quality of life of the people around them. And that's very true. When you consider how many residential areas surround the traffic circle, and also as you're coming in from any direction, we are lined by residential areas. And yet this is a design, the only one of which we found in Massachusetts that, Doug, you were familiar with, mentioning that it was anchored by a Costco that served 3 million people. You know, I can understand an intersection like this up there. I'm not sure I see it as appropriate for Pinehurst in the future. So this is beyond aesthetics. This is about the quality of life of a lot of our residents, and I think we should keep that in mind. The other concern I have is that it's all based on an increase of 30,000 trips per day by the year 2050. That's 25 years from now. And as I look, if what we're looking at is just an extension of trips that are coming into this circle today, we are missing the big picture. I mentioned earlier that I had gone to an event where someone from Amazon was talking about what they're doing in Richmond County. So think about the Moore land use plan, Moore County land use plan. Think about what's going on in Chatham County and other counties all around us, and how that is going to affect traffic patterns 25 years from now. So I think we kind of need to broaden the scope. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Jack? You were here pre-circle, if I remember right.
Pre-circle, you're right. I don't really have a lot more to add from what Barb and everyone else has said, to tell you the truth. I think that that business of living near multiple large intersections with stop-and-go traffic is very, very serious, more so than you really think. Having spent a short time in the hospital a little while ago, I can tell you that is noisy as cars accelerate from the stoplights, and now you'll have X number of stoplights. There'll be more accelerating. It'll be a very noisy, busy place 24 hours a day. I'm also mostly concerned with, or a concern is as many small incremental items that we have mentioned to NCDOT, very few have really been seriously considered. We talked about sight lines. We talked about the approach angles on certain roads, like 211 into the circle is too acute. And if you look at the crash data, you see that it varies by approach angle, and they haven't seemed to take any of that seriously as far as making some minor improvements. I asked one of the NCDOT people at the meeting the other day, what will be the speed limit through this section? Because Midland Road is 35 and 211 is 45, as it turns out, and they had no answer. They said, I hadn't even thought about that just yet. So the speed limit through this 6-lane section of road may be a contributing factor to safety issues. And I think that they've been very reluctant right now to even modify speed limits approaching our current circle, which may or may not help the not only the traffic flow but also the safety issue. So there's so many small incremental improvements that could be made over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years that may substantially make a difference. The other thing that kind of bugs me a little bit is the design is for the worst case scenario. Design is for the peak hour traffic, the backup for the peak hour, whatever that is, 2, 3, 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. It's not for the 24 hours a day, 7 days a week traffic. So it's all designed to relieve the peak traffic hour backup. And yeah, that's important, but if you're driving during the rush hour, you expect to be backed up, any place in the world I've ever lived. So I think there has to be some realistic assessments as far as what is the design objective. I mean, does it really make sense? Those are the few things that I could add on that one.
All right. Thank you, Jack, and fellow council members. Clearly, we have an interest in going forward and continuing the discussion with NCDOT. We want to hear from our residents regarding their thoughts, original ideas or not. I do want to close by just complimenting NCDOT, and in particular Chief Engineer, who's always been accommodating if we wanted to have a meeting, and would even send emails back to questions that we might have, and he would give very precise answers, or as precise as he could. So look forward to continue to working with them. And we do, I think it was, may have been John who said, the timeline allows us not to make a mistake. They're not talking about acquiring right away and thinking to 2027. You said they're not going to put a shovel in the ground at 2031. There's no real change happening around there land-wise. There's not going to be a Costco or something going to be all of a sudden try to be developed. There's what's there is there. So we've got the benefit of some time here, which is one of the reasons I talked about trying to target that first quarter in 2026 as to coming to closer to some sort of a solution when we'll have more data. We'll have a couple new members on the council, and we'll take it from there. Okay. All right.
Before we leave the NCDOT thing, I saw in the paper, and I wish I had cut it out and brought it in, there is a public hearing or a public open house for the improvements scheduled for Morganton and Route 5. And I believe within a couple weeks, and I believe it's at the elementary school. So
Oh, if we can find out the date on that, maybe some of us can
Yep.
attend it.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that meeting, so, but thanks for.
There,
letting us know.
it was in the pilot, yesterday. Now, the last one I went to, or tried to go to, at the
Yes.
elementary school, I and three other people were the only ones there, no one else showed up, so, it may or may not happen.
Thank you, Jack. Yeah, well, if Doug finds something out, he can let us know. All right. The next item we have, item C, is the discussion on ideas to proactively address visitor behaviors at short-term rentals in Pinehurst. Doug, you have a memo to us, and why don't you walk us through?
Yeah, I want to give actually Barb a lot of credit for this, because these are her ideas, but.
Okay.
So we have a few ideas here. I think the thought is if we can let people know what the expectations are when they arrive to the village, when they're visiting, that might solve some problems later on down the road. So we have a few options here. One is communicate with all the owners of short-term rentals. So we have sent a letter out in the past and said, encourage your guests to be good neighbors. But one thing we could add to that is maybe a magnet that they can put on the fridge or a poster that they can put near the front door that kind of specifies some of the things we want them to consider, like what the quiet hours are, what their trash day might be, that they need to bring their trash cans in at the end of the day, things like that might be helpful to avoid neighborly problems. And then the second one was to add some signage at our neighborhood. So we have currently this sign at the beginning of all our neighborhoods, the entrance, and we could change it to something like this. So just, no parking the right of way, keep the noise down after 10. Maybe if there's something else we wanted to add to that, we potentially could. Just as long as the sign doesn't get too big.
That's certainly friendlier, but do we need to reference the ordinance number and all so forth in order to be legal?
It doesn't have to be listed, but we can certainly add it if we wanted to.
We don't reference it whenever we say no parking. So I wouldn't think we need to reference it on this one. I think it's just going to clutter the sign up.
I think the message is clear, and
If we add signage like this, is there anything that we should add to a sign like this?
other than maybe our pine cone.
Instead of one of those swirly things, you can add
Yeah.
a pine cone.
Do you think AI can make a pine cone?
AI can make a pine cone. It made this sign. So.
I'm about to say that's AI generated, so.
I don't know how to better state it, but someone coming from out of town, are they going to understand where the right-of-way is? If there was a curb, you'd say no parking in the street. There's not a curb.
Yeah.
We know what it means, but I'd ask you to think about it. I'm not sure I have a better suggestion.
Yep, we can consider that. And then the last suggestion was that we create a voluntary gold standard program wherein they allow a inspector or a village employee to come in and check for some of our life and safety measures and ensure that they're being compatible with all those things. I did speak with our village attorney about this one specifically. He had some cautions. So because it's voluntary, I don't think we have a legal issue if we wanted to set something up. But some people could be upset that you're giving someone an advantage because you created this program, and so you're giving someone else an advantage over someone who doesn't want to do the thing. Also, if there were ever to be if the inspectors go in and find a violation, what if they don't fix it immediately, or do we have some sort of liability on that? Probably not, but these were things we would need to flesh out more if we were going to move forward with a program like that.
I hadn't thought about the latter part, because in the federal government, that's an issue with OSHA inspectors. So, yes, good thing to run down and clear up.
So yeah, I think the first two are actually relatively easy. We could do those things. If we wanted to look more into the third, it would take some more thinking and fleshing out.
We discussed this some when we had the big STR conversation 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. And for the folks who were not in favor of doing a prohibition on there was discussion on creating a voluntary program like this that's for positive reinforcement that's on there. I like the aspect of positive reinforcement. I think it's a good thing to do there. But I think the devil's in the details, like Doug has referenced here. You also not only talk about just the voluntary aspect, what happens when you find a violation, safety violation whatsoever, how do you enforce the fixing of that? But it's another job, it's another amount of man hours that's being put onto the staffs, another FTEs you're talking about, that's within that. And so I do think that thinking about this a little bit farther on the idea, how do you create something that's a positive reinforcement, but not make it a big liability on the village. So I would encourage you to flesh that out more, as you described.
I think one and two are the low-hanging fruit items here that would, and then we need to drill down more on that item 3, just to be sure that we're not creating something we might regret or could cause us the wrong type of problem. Because the first 2 items alone, of course, I'm sure they'll make a difference. I'm sure. How many people have, if you're a renter, do you have any idea when the trash cans have to go out? I mean, you really don't, unless there's a sign or there's that instructions sheet. If you ever, you stated something like this, and they tell you in that sheet, you got to take the garbage out this day or something. But if that sheet's missing, you can't find it. You don't worry about that. It goes back to that old theory of, was it Tom Peters? Nobody washes a rental car, and so folks are not going to bend over backwards on that. But so that's why I like the idea of the owner.
Well, most short-term rentals do have a book on the place you're renting. I've rented various places.
Sure.
They'll have a rental or a book that says explaining this, explaining that, and if it's garbage on there, whether you put it down the garbage chute or whether you take it outside, that kind of thing.
And you got to read it.
That's correct, and you got to read that street sign too that says no parking, right? So there's lots of things, the information we provided. Before you decide to put a poster out, and we're paying money for a poster, you might want to talk with some of the short-term rental owners as to what they think is valuable, because if not, you may have a bunch of posters in the garbage because it's a voluntary thing. So let's not waste the money.
Good advice. Okay. Other thoughts?
Well, relative to the gold standard program, all of your concerns are obviously real, and something we have to follow up on. I think what we should do, because it is a proactive approach, because there is the possibility, obviously we run it by an attorney, that we can not only reinforce our own SR9 regulations, but also include some best practices that are valued by the industry itself. So there could be some really good things coming out of this. So my suggestion would be, let's put something together, run it by the attorney, run it by the council, and see what it looks like.
Yeah, I like your particular suggestion of, let's find out what the industry's best practices are here. We can save ourselves a lot of time if these folks have probably studied this a little and said, hey, this works. Do this.
Well, if VRBO and Airbnb are well aware of Pinehurst.
Yes.
Because there's been a lot of discussion in the past 3.5 years with Pinehurst. And so when you talk about industry standards, like in Airbnb, they end up having a superhost. Well, are they interested in doing something that's going to be an evaluation factor for how the municipality looks at them? And not just do it for Pinehurst, but do it for every location. So can you adjust the industry standard there? Possibly. It starts with a conversation. I go back to a positive reinforcement type of system is something I like, okay? And how can we hash that out? I don't think what we have right now is something that's really feasible, but not throw the baby out with the bathwater, okay? Let's keep on working on positive reinforcement stuff.
I mean, there still are, I believe, 2 towns in North Carolina that have adopted a mandatory annual permit program. And I still don't understand how that's different from requiring registration. This, to the extent it's voluntary,
I don't like that at all.
no, I'm not proposing that we do
Okay,
it. What
all
I'm
right.
saying is, instead of a mandatory program, which is not focused on encouraging positive behavior, I like this approach a lot better. It may not be perfect in this form, but worth refining.
All righty. We'll look for more feedback, Doug, on that one particular item there. We now can move to item 10, other business. Doug, you mentioned a few things earlier, which sort of were other business, but we covered them, the deer and the buffalo, the deer and the other item. Yeah.
Cover that.
Okay, anything else you want to bring up?
Just to follow up on what Jack mentioned, so there is the meeting on the Morganton Road NC5 intersection that is going to be Thursday, November 13th at the Pinehurst Elementary School between 5 and 7 p.m.
Doug, do we have any results yet on our culling activities in West Pinehurst Park?
I haven't asked. I can ask NC Wildlife.
Other questions for Doug or any items of other business?
I think our next meeting is on November 18th, correct?
It is.
Okay, so it's not the usual second Tuesday?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Is
thank you.
there, Doug, anything in particular you want us to be prepared for that meeting? Or is there anything here somebody thinks we should be sure to put on there, other than obviously the PDO?
Is it the 18th or the 11th? The 11th is the second Tuesday.
Yeah, it's not the 11th. It's
Not
the
the 11th.
It's the
18th. Since there's only one in November and one in December,
Yeah.
put them in the middle of the month.
So we know we're going to obviously discuss.
I don't think we'll have anything coming out of the planning and zoning that will make it to the council meeting by that time, right?
I don't believe so.
I think so either. There's one review, I think, on their meeting in the beginning of November. I don't think it'll make it to the 18th, though.
Anyone else? John, Dr. Morgan, Barb, is there anything else? Okay, well then, having exhausted,
I move to adjourn the regular meeting.
we have a motion?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.